brutal, savage, barbaric, cold-hearted. This European king was all this and more. Who am I talking about? The explorer Henry Morton Stanley traveled across Africa exploring lands, lakes and rivers. He wrote a book, Through the Dark Continent, which became a bestseller. Stanley's report of the Congo interested the Belgian king, Leopold II. He employed Stanley to claim land in the Congo for him. Stanley worked to set up Belgian bases and build roads there from 1879 to 1884. Stanley would go on to sign treaties with African rulers, claiming to establish trade agreements and alliances with them. However, most of these leaders did not even know what they were signing up for. These treaties gave Leopold control over the land and its resources. The tyrant king claimed the Congo basin as his own personal property, not as a colony of Belgium. He called it the Congo Free State, but there was nothing free about the lives of the Congolese people. It was the world's only major colony owned by one man. It marked the beginning of a wretched life for the Africans living in the Congo. Leopold then began a public relations campaign. He told leaders from the United States that his people were in the Congo to study the region. He very much wanted to educate the Africans and end slavery, so he said. In 1884, a number of European countries met in Berlin to discuss how they were going to each own a piece of this great continent. For 4 months, they argued over which part of Africa belonged to whom. Stanley the explorer was there to plead King Leopold's case. His representatives promised to allow other countries to trade freely in the Congo. In return, the European countries gave Leopold control over the area. Then, in the early 1890s, a fantastic source of wealth suddenly came about. The invention of the inflatable bicycle tire, followed soon by that of the automobile tire, triggered an enormous boom in rubber. Throughout the world's tropics, people rushed to establish rubber plantations. But new rubber trees often require 15 years of growth before they can be tapped. That's a long time. Those who profited were the people who owned land where rubber grew wild. That brings us back to none other than King Leopold II. His territory, the Congo Free State as he had called it, comprised of wild rubber vines. By the mid-1890s, there was a demand for ivory as well as rubber. The Congolese people were forced to work in rubber plantations under horrific conditions. The people were beaten, mutilated and killed if they failed to meet their daily rubber quotas. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Workers spent weeks at a time in the forest. They often slept in wooden cages to protect themselves from leopards. They also had to climb high up the rubber trees and would often injure themselves in the process and even lose their lives. Under these conditions, many Africans didn't want to do this work. I mean, would you? One white officer wrote in his diary that the native doesn't like working. He has to be compelled to do it. What a lie. The white officer himself, for sure, could also not have wanted to do such dangerous work. Leopold also employed a private army, the Force Publique, to enforce his rule and maintain control over the Congolese population. This army was notorious for its brutality and its soldiers were known to commit horrific acts of violence against Congolese men, women and children. Some of these soldiers cut off the hands of those who failed to meet their quotas, while others would hold family members hostage until the quota was met. By the late 1890s, ivory hunters had killed off nearly all the elephant herds in the country. Even after Leopold had relinquished his control of the Congo, those horrible memories lingered. One man stated,
Raba caused all these torments. That's why we no longer want to hear its name spoken.
Meanwhile, his wickedness was having the time of his life. He imported African animals for Belgium zoos. His bedroom was paneled with wood from Congo. He added a Congo section to his greenhouse, complete with palm trees and other tropical plants. But what about the Congolese? Did they sit idly by and take all this oppression like sitting ducks? No, they didn't. In the far south, for example, a chief named Mulum Nyama led warriors of the Sanga people in a rebellion that killed one of the king's officers. State troops pursued them, trapping Mulum Nyama and his soldiers in a large cave. They refused to surrender. Nzansu, a chief in the region near the Great Congo River Rapids, led rebels who killed a hated colonial official and pillaged several state posts. Christian missionaries also began to give Leopold a headache. Some were outraged at the brutal forced labor system. They began to talk and write about what they saw: Africans whipped to death, rivers full of corpses, then piles of severed hands, a detail that quickly seared itself on the world's imagination. One of the most outspoken missionaries was William Shepherd, the first black missionary in the Congo. Shepherd began to closely investigate the inhuman activities that were taking place in the Congo. One time, being mistaken for a government official, he was openly shown the bodies of many of the victims. He counted 81 right hands that had been cut off. He also found 60 women confined in a pen. Shepherd documented his findings using a Kodak camera. The public outcry led to the formation of the Congo Reform Association, a group of activists campaigning for an end to the atrocities in Congo. Apart from the black missionary Shepherd, another man that exposed the atrocities going on in the Congo was a brave journalist called Edmund Moel. But what did the Mad King do? Did he just fold his hands and await his fate? Oh no, he didn't. He defended himself. He said that in actual fact, the Congolese were not being murdered but were simply dying of disease. He insisted that forced labor was the only way to get Africans to do what needed to be done. In fact, in 1908 King Leopold ordered the archives of his Congo state burned. Nevertheless, his brutal, cold-hearted reign had come to an abrupt end. In 1908 Belgium took over the administration of the Congo. However, this did not make life a lot better for the Congolese. Most of the land in the Congo belonged to the government or private companies. What the reign of Leopold had accomplished was sadistic. The population had been slashed through a combination of disease, famine, slave labor, suppression of rebellions, then diminished birth rate by some 50% during his reign. This comes to a total population decline of 10 million. But beyond any doubt, what happened in the Congo was one of the greatest catastrophes of modern times. As we reflect on this dark chapter in history, we must acknowledge the ongoing neocolonialism of Africa and the brave souls who are speaking out about it. Africa shall one day be truly free.